This is a lecture for week 5 of Adler Graduate School course number 771, Creating and Assessing the Therapeutic Alliance. The topic of this lecture is the construct of goal in the therapeutic relationship. Individual psychology organizes the personality around a fictional final goal and holds that all behavior is purposive and is best understood as movement towards that goal. This is different from the way I'm going to be talking about goal in this lecture, which focuses on the goals of therapy and the level of agreement between therapist and client about these goals. First, I will go over the items from the goal subscale of the Working Alliance inventory. After reviewing these items, I will discuss some highlights from the individual psychology and general psychotherapy literature on goal alignment in therapy. We will see that our individual psychology method of teleological analysis of the personality is carried over to our conceptualization of the therapeutic relationship. I will finish with the proposition that a working knowledge of the theory and behavioral manifestations of social interest is one of the primary contributions the therapist brings to the goal component of the Working Alliance. This course approaches the therapeutic alliance from 4 interrelated perspectives: informed consent, bond, task, and goal. The focus of this lecture is the goal perspective. I will be using the 12 items from the goal subscale of the Working Alliance inventory to define and discuss the construct of goal in the therapeutic relationship. Then I will present some of the literature from individual psychology and psychotherapy to enhance our understanding of the construct of goal in the therapeutic relationship. First, let's consider the general definition of goal and the way that goal is used in the individual psychology literature. In general language, a goal is the result or achievement towards which effort is directed. It can also be the object of a person's ambition or effort, or the destination of a journey. In individual psychology, the analysis of the person is based on an understanding of the goal of the psychic movement, at various times called the fictional goal, the guiding self-ideal, or the fictional final goal by Adler. The goal is the central organizing principle of the personality in individual psychology. It is a self-created fiction or narrative worldview formed early in life that shapes the apperceptive schema of the person. Now let's see how the Working Alliance inventory defines goal. These 4 negatively scored items all seem to focus on feelings about the outcome of the therapy. Item 3 is a self-evaluation of these feelings. Item 3 on the client form is, I am worried about the outcome of these sessions. Item 9 assesses the perceived need for a clarification process about the process of therapy. On the therapist form, it is the perception of the therapist, while on the client form, it is the perception of the client of a need to clarify the therapeutic purpose. Item 12 is focused on the feelings of the therapist from both a self-perspective and the perspective of the client. On the client form, this item is, my therapist does not understand what I am trying to accomplish in therapy. Item 34 is about the therapist's perception of the client's expectations and the client's self-perception of expectations. On the client form, this item is, I don't know what to expect as a result of my therapy. It strikes me that this aspect of the goal construct of the Working Alliance inventory is related to the optimism of the therapist about therapy and his or her ability to imbue the client with optimism about the therapy. It is implied here that clearly stated goals in therapy are important in creating this optimism, and thus are an essential component of a good working alliance. These items amplify the construct of goal in several different ways. Item 14 focuses on the importance of the goals to the client. On the therapist form, it is the perception of the therapist, while on the client form, it is the self-perception of the client of the importance of the goals that have been established. Item 25 implies some education of the client by the therapist about change processes. This seems to me to be more related to the task scale of the Working Alliance inventory that we discussed last week. Items 10 and 27, both reverse scored, seem to focus on the level of agreement between the client and therapist about the goals, and in this way are similar to the next 4 items that we will discuss on the next slide. Along with the 2 items from the last slide, these 4 items focus on agreement between therapist and client about the goals of the therapy. The emphasis is on mutual agreement and collaboration. Taken together, these 6 items strongly suggest that the goals of therapy are to be discussed and agreed to by both therapist and client. This process of negotiation contributes to a feeling of mutual respect, with the perspective of both the therapist and the client being incorporated into the problem list and the treatment goals. More than any other psychological theory, individual psychology has adopted a teleological method of reasoning and analysis, and some have suggested the term teleoanalysis to describe our therapeutic process. This focus on purpose or goal supports a view of life as movement, which is individual psychology's term for what other theorists call behavior, although a line of movement is meant to include all related thought, feeling, and physical activity, not just behavior. The construct of Gemeinschaftsgefühl, social interest, establishes the psychological health and adaptability of various lines of movement. At the psychodynamic level of analysis, it is felt inferiorities and superiorities and the compensations they evoke that are unhealthy. At the interpersonal level of analysis, above or below is one dimension of disturbance, and level of inclusion or exclusion is a second dimension. Individual psychology explicitly defines goal alignment as essential to the therapeutic task. Aligning the goals of therapy requires that the therapist listen to and understand the goals that the client has for themselves. I believe that treatment planning in individual psychology should be oriented around the goals that the therapist and client have identified and agreed to. Asking the client, "How will you know when this problem is resolved?" often reveals and amplifies the client's sense of the problem as well as the values they have that are related to the problem area. The negotiation of therapeutic goals can be an opportunity for the therapist to engage with the client in thoughts about psychological health and to educate them about constructive lines of movement from the perspective of individual psychology. Within the therapeutic contract, it is the individual psychology therapist's responsibility to be familiar with the literature on Gemeinschaftsgefühl, to be able to teach the client the basics of this theory, and to be able to apply this theory to a variety of problems of living which clients present. This formulation of the therapeutic relationship helps an individual psychology therapist address those impasses in therapy that are called resistance in other conceptualizations of the therapeutic task and relationship. When an individual psychology therapist senses an impasse in the course of treatment, he or she can reiterate the goals that have been agreed to and renegotiate if there is a need for a new goal to be identified. A regular review of the goals of therapy and a connecting of the goals with the process, interventions, and homework of therapy is likely to increase the motivation of the client and decrease the frequency of these impasses. As a part of the American Psychological Association's Division of Psychotherapy and Division of Clinical Psychology Joint Task Force on Evidence-Based Therapy Relationships, that is described in a different lecture on this course, Tryon and Winograd identified 15 studies that relate goal consensus to treatment outcome and 19 studies that relate collaboration to treatment outcome. Goal consensus was defined as client-therapist congruence on the nature of the client's problems and the way the two parties will work together to achieve these goals, while collaboration is an active process of cooperation in this endeavor. In the meta-analyses of these two groups of studies, these authors found very significant effect sizes, suggesting that meaningful positive outcome in therapy are associated with improved agreement between therapist and client on the aims of therapy, and with better collaboration between therapist and client over the course of treatment. These results point to a number of practices that therapists can profitably employ. First, begin work on client problems only after you and the client agree on treatment goals and the ways you will together go about reaching them. Second, rarely push your own agenda. Listen to what your clients tell you and formulate interventions with their input and their understanding. Third, encourage clients to contribute throughout therapy by asking for their feedback, insights, reflections, and elaborations. Fourth, educate clients about the importance of their collaborative contribution to the success of therapy.